We're lucky to have Netdev maintainer extraordinary, Jakub, here with us today. And he's going to tell us what he's expecting from us going forward.
Okay. All right. So the talk will be a little all over the place because I didn't have any clear topic to talk about. I'm glad that you all showed up to the talk that is named the process update. I feel like I should suggest that we will do Scrum or something like that.
You can try.
All right. I would also like to thank Jamal for organizing and various. I feel like I should do one of these since this is Canada. So there we go. Yes. So I have 3 subtopics to cover. Process, which will be fairly short, and what I've been working on myself, and the development statistics, which is an amazing idea. If you don't have anything to talk about, take a book out of John Corbett's. Take a page out of John Corbett's book, and then there's always something to talk about if you have statistics. So our process is very simple. I think you all know how we operate on Netdev. We closed the tree. I think one thing that in the other parts of the talk, I'll be asking you all to participate more in the reviewing the patches. One thing that I wanted to point out in this on this slide is quite like the opposite of that. We shut down the netnext tree during the merge window in part to give all the reviewers a little like breathing room. So feel free to step away a little bit during the merge window and have some rest if you feel overwhelmed by all the patches that come through. I think that's kind of by design. And we also do a little bit of shutdowns. I think we did that last year for the winter holidays. We sent a poll and everybody was quite in favor of basically shutting down the tree for another week, I think. So when people travel, there are no patches and no one has to worry about stuff getting in or not getting reviewed. So yeah, take advantage of the shutdowns. Something else that's I think relevant to our development process, something that I think about a lot is how do we lower the barriers to participation? I think one of the major issues we have is that there's too many patches and like new people do not know where to start and how to start reviewing and how to start participating. We are working on that, trying to figure out a way to make it easier with lore and the light tools to subscribe to only part of the mailing list maybe, or subscribe to more like by topic basis, so that basically you can lower the volume of patches to whatever you're interested in and start participating in a specific like slice of the Netdev mailing list. We also don't have documentation, which is something we're trying to improve on. I comment a lot and try to push people to write more documentation with mixed results. I think it's important that we do a better job on that. And obviously, I think the testing and verification comes up in a lot of contexts. And I think in this context is also relevant because like when new people come in and try to hack on the kernel and they don't have any tests to verify that what they did is actually correct, it does not give them a good feeling. And it's a lot of uncertainty for newcomers. So if we had better testing, we would benefit from it. So those are like the things that I think about. And when I see an opportunity to improve, I try. And if you have any ideas of how to like make the community more welcoming, definitely reach out or try to help. All right, so that's the process part. Now I will talk about stuff that I've been actually working on. First one, Netlink, which the reason for I started the Netlink YAML project is a couple of years ago. I think the reason is in networking we need a lot of configuration APIs to configure all the hardware and all the protocols, and I think that our configuration API story wasn't that strong. This is a list of of priorities, sort of. So we have gone for a long time with like no ability to add any APIs, even in iftool, because everybody understood that the IOC tools are bad and inextensible, and nobody stepped up for a long time to rewrite it in Netlink. Then we got Michał, who did an amazing job with rewriting iftool, but still, like, not everything fits into iftool. So even with iftool updated to use Netlink, we had a lot of things that were like still needed an API. So if we don't do that, then the drivers will basically make a guess, and the guesses they make are very rarely compatible, and we end up in a situation where someone deploys a single vendor for a while, then they change the vendor for the NICs they buy, and then basically things start to break randomly because the driver was making a different assumptions, and the applications don't perform anymore. And if we want to produce a cross-vendor networking stack, that kind of stuff should not happen. So yeah, implicit assumptions are bad. The kernel should tell the drivers and the protocols basically what the user wants, or at least provide some defaults, and we need APIs for that. There are some exceptions, obviously, where the like common APIs are not possible. The statistics is one of those. We try to create as many common interfaces for statistics as possible, but unavoidably, some of them will be like specific to the device or the driver, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. In terms of the work that I've been doing, adding the configuration APIs, they were mostly around like real issues that we see in production at Meta. I work at Meta. One of the things which I think is fairly embarrassing for us as a community is the fact that we still don't have a good API to configure interrupt pinning. Everybody has their own scripts, and the scripts involve a lot of guessing, and it's really not a great situation when every like major data center or every major Linux user has to write their own scripts to pin things. So I think the work that is coming up in the Netdev Netlink interface to configure the queues and the NAPI interfaces will add sufficient information to start basically moving that problem away from the user. And I'm hoping that we can get like systemd or something along those lines to configure the default pinning. With like AMD systems becoming more and more popular, like interrupt pinning and configuring the basic interrupt spreading and XPS, it's something that should be done automatically by the OS. So I already gave a more in-depth talk about the Netlink stuff, and there's documentation in the tree, so I will not go into details. I just give a status update now for where we got with it, and how what things it can basically provide. So the Netlink, we have a way of expressing Netlink APIs using a YAML spec file, and we have a code generator which can generate the kernel policies and some of the static data structures that the kernel needs based on that spec without any extra code getting written. And on the user space side, the entire user space, like binding library parser, can be auto-generated fully from the spec. The goals, sort of the 4 points that I had in mind when I started this work, was to increase the adoption of like Netlink, generic Netlink throughout the stack, increase the developer efficiency, and then documentation, and make the user space integration easier. So the adoption is looking pretty good. This is the list of basically people who contributed to the specs we have in the kernel. So you can see that I'm number 4. I didn't even do 10%, so there's clearly other people contributing. I color coded it a little bit. The first 3 people wrote specs for existing families, but the green people wrote new specs, which is really exciting to see. So the DPLL interface, the Netdev interface, Chuck is working on the handshake API and some NFS stuff. So it's really great to see the adoption is already taking off. The other 3 points, the development efficiency, I think, is also checked off. A lot of people are using the Python CLI tooling, so you can basically write the kernel code and then the entire user space stuff to test it and and try it out. It's an op. You just use the Python CLI, and it can let you send all whatever commands you want. That looks pretty great. It looks almost too good because I'm worried that now that nobody will be writing IP Route 2 tools, because everybody will just use the Python CLI, which is slightly hacked up and not really meant for production, but we'll see. On the documentation side, the YAML specs, they contain documentation. The intent is to basically render the documentation in like a human readable form as part of the kernel documentation, read the docs interface. And we're making some progress on that. There will be patches coming soon to the main list, which I'm really excited about. On the user space, I think we are doing the least well. There's the C code generator, which I wrote, and we have the Python CLI, but the higher level languages, we are still lacking. So if anyone is interested in like writing some automatic netlink binding code generator for C++ or Rust, it will be, yeah, I can guarantee you that it will be used in production because we needed that method too. Switching gears to particular applications, the page pool API is one of the interfaces which I added, which I'm trying to add. The patches haven't been merged yet. In the page pool implementation, there's a bunch of statistics that are being gathered, and everybody obviously puts them in the if2-s output. That's not amazing for multiple reasons. One of them is that the page pools which get detached from the driver are you can no longer see their statistics. And then if a page pool gets leaked, it's pretty much invisible. So what we end up doing is we print a warning into the kernel logs that there might be a possible leak. And that warning has high false positive rate. So, not great. So I'm trying to add a page pool statistic gathering API, which will allow you to basically get the same statistics, but for all the page pools in the system. And you can quite easily calculate a recycling rate. And hopefully with that, it will be possible to monitor page pools and like at scale, basically for every machine in our fleet. There's, I think the recycling thing is fairly exciting. We can see how well the page pool API actually performs in production. And the other one is the amount of memory that the page pools are actually holding. In networking, it's probably something that people don't think about too much, but the NIC can actually hold onto a lot of memory to basically keep the free list buffers filled. So it can easily go into gigabytes with NICs with a lot of queues, and that's a kernel memory that's like allocated from pages. So no kernel statistics currently display that as like this is networking memory that is sitting unused. And when people start asking about where did all the memory go for my workload, like all the other subsystem, the page cache people can answer, and networking currently only knows how much TCP is holding onto, right? The driver memory is not accounted. So with this API, I mean, we'll change that. The Queue API, which has been talked about for a long time, is an idea of creating an API which will basically allow people to allocate and configure queues within the stack without reconfiguring the entire interface. We have some ideas about that, and various people are contributing. We'll see how far that goes. It will be really useful for multiple purposes. I don't know if you remember when we started working on XDP, there was a big push to allow installing XDP programs for individual queues. This API could finally deliver on that promise, perhaps. Okay, and that's it for development. And now onto the statistics. These are the statistics for the 6.7 kernel release. Maybe I should start with an explanation of the statistics that we gather and then we publish. Every release cycle, I post to the mailing list the development statistics. I think the major thing that I want to thank people for is participating in reviews. So when you look at the statistics, you'll see that the top reviewers is the first thing that we report on. So these are the top reviewers for the 6.7 release cycle. I think there's a lot of familiar names. The Keys is popping up in there too. Case is popping up there too, because he was reviewing a lot of the security changes. And yes, I mean, thanks to all those people for reviewing the Netdev code. The other thing that we put in the statistics is we try to calculate a score, which basically tells us how much each company is contributing in terms of how much code they're dumping on us versus how much they are contributing to reviews. That's, I think, calculated basically by counting the number of patches you posted and subtracting the number of patches that you reviewed. So the companies which are contributing positively, and that means they reviewed more, are on the left here. Red Hat and Meta, I think now with Simon Horman moving to Red Hat, the Red Hat position is probably very safe, and they will stay at number one forever. And I would like to also shout out Andrew Lan, who as a single person company is always at the first 3 spots. There's some trickiness there around the larger companies like Broadcom, because they have different divisions, and some of the divisions work upstream a little better than others, but currently we count everybody into a single unit. I will not comment on the negative side. I mean, you all see who they are. Since I've been publishing those stats for 5 releases, according to this graph, we can draw some lines and pretty graphs. And this graph shows the number of messages that arrive on the mailing list for every release cycle and the number of commits that we do to the tree. This does not account for weekends, so this is over just the number of days. And it's normalized to the number of days in the cycle. So you can see that the blue line is commits per day. The networking maintainers apply around 18 patches a day, and we get around 250 emails on any day. This is a graph which counts how many people participate in the mailing list reviews. And the mailing list in general, we have around 700 individuals in every release cycle. I think what is the number of people who comment, so it's broken down at the bottom of people who are authors, which means they only send patches, and then people who only comment on patches and people who do both. The number of people who do both, comment and submit, is fairly stable. The other ones fluctuate quite a little bit, but yeah, we have around 700 individuals in every cycle. And this is a number of tags. So the average number of review tags, the average percentage of commits which went into the kernel with at least one review tag for the entire kernel is about 45%, according to John and his number crunching. So I think we are strongly above that. We are doing better than the average kernel in terms of number of reviews. I've broken it out between tags. In the red line is just counting all the review tags, and the yellow line is counting review tags which do not share the same domain basically as the author of the code or the same company. Like I try to fudge it a little bit so that people who just use Gmail don't get counted as all Gmail. So yeah, I mean, we're doing way better than the kernel average, which is great. One other thing that I noticed when I was doing this graph is this line goes up and down a little bit. But the interesting part is that the percentage of commits which get reviewed looks like it's kind of strongly correlated with the number of messages we get. So if we have an uptick in the number of messages, that doesn't just mean that we get more patches. It also means apparently that we get more reviews, which is interesting. And maybe people are less busy. Were less busy during the 6.6 cycle and had time to review. I don't know why, but the correlation looks pretty clear. Okay, that is all. Okay, that was a very short talk. I apologize. Please participate in reviews. If you are looking for side projects or want to try kernel programming, do reach out to us. We do have a list of things. They're not always kernel programming, but there's definitely a lot of work that always needs to be done. And if you have any feedback about how the maintainers operate and stuff, also let us know. We can't promise that we will always side with you, but feedback is very valuable. So thank you.
I should stay on this side.
Okay. Well, first, thank you, obviously, for doing this amazing amount of work, fantastic work for all of us. So when we can contribute to review, how can we get more people to help out with reviewing? And I think one of the things that has come up recently was the difference between the act by and reviewed by, where sort of act by is sometimes understood to be, well, it looks good to me, but I don't fully understand it. Whereas the definition says it's actually for maintainers. Whereas reviewed by is, I reviewed this and I will stand by it. And I think that that's a level that some people might be uncomfortable with. So do we want more people reviewing with the, I will stand by it, but here's an asterisk? Or, do we want more reviewers, and how do we get them?
Feels right to me tag.
Yeah.
The joke was that we should add a tag which just says feels right. So we try to contribute to the documentation and clarify this a little bit. I think in this release cycle we added some extra information to the kernel process documentation that says just chime in. It doesn't matter whether you provide a tag or not, just answering on the mailing list is enough. So the statistics that we calculate are not counting. Most of them, other than the one that tries to count the percentage of how many patches went in with a review tag, all the other statistics are just based on mailing list traffic, right? So you don't have to provide any tag. Just saying that the code looks fine is perfectly fine and very helpful.
Okay, thanks. That's great. And maybe a related question is on the testing, getting better testing. As a reviewer and certainly as a maintainer, I would imagine you get higher confidence if you know that code comes with tests that maybe are shipped with the code or otherwise has been tested. Is there something we could do there? Like internally, at some point, we just at Google maintained, you have to have a small summary that says, how did you test this thing? Which is a very low bar. Any thoughts on how to increase testing?
Yeah, I mean, the trade-off for requiring that people describe their testing is that we get so many patches which don't comply with the most basic rules. Sometimes it's just too much work to try to iterate on those patches and get them to be right. So, I mean, if we can have a two-tiered system where we complain to known contributors that they're not providing us enough information, then they will complain that they are being singled out for that, and someone else can send a patch and it gets merged without the note about testing. And I mean, I would be great if the more patches, and we would strongly encourage people to add information about how the patches were tested, but I don't think we can enforce it.
All right, thanks.
Hello. I have two questions. So the first one is, I wonder how do you usually count the reviewers? Because sometimes when I review some patch, I don't provide any whatever review by or act by or naked by, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I go through so from lore, you can download the entire history of the mailing list traffic. So I go through the threads, parse them as emails, and I see which threads got comments from someone who's not an author, and that's basically counts as a review always. Yeah. So any reply is a review.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Thank you. Yeah, the second question is, I totally get your point. To encourage people to do more code review. I totally get the point. However, from my point of view, actually, this may be discourage new developers because if people want to contribute some patch and they have to do the code review, to get a better score, right? So I think from this point of view, this may be a little bit discourage new developer. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need to keep an eye on that and keep that in check, but it's always trade-offs, right?
Thank you.
Oh, there's one. Okay.
Curious about if you give negative scores to some people, someone will not comment, just suddenly just comment more, maybe just to get better score. So you get just a lot of spam.
We haven't had that problem yet. I mean, we haven't, easy ways to discourage toxic behavior. If you're also a contributor, I would advise you not to spam the list because your code may be in the end of the review queue for a long time.
Netdev has a social media plan. No one wants Jamal to say anything.
Also, as you know, I'm new to the whole community. So how do you suggest I start reviewing things without spamming the list saying looks good to me while actually contributing something so I can show that I'm looking at it?
You just start responding. You can say that, looks good to me. And, as you go down and learn more, that the maintainers understand who the people are. We know the community. So we will know, that if someone new comes in and says, this looks good to me, to assign appropriate, trust to that versus if the experienced reviewer reviews something. So just start participating.
Okay, thanks.
Somebody's getting in your way, Jamal, all the time.
So Kuba, I just want to commend you on the amount of mail processing you and the top maintainers do. It's pretty incredible the flow of traffic that you guys have to deal with. What do you use? What are some of the tricks that you use for processing some of that traffic?
I wish I knew tricks. I mean, you just need to read all the emails, unfortunately. I think I mentioned the Lorelei thing. That's if you know what you're interested in, just setting up a Lorelei filter and filtering in basically so you only get in your inbox where you're interested in and you don't waste time basically marking as read all the stuff that you don't care about. I think that would be useful, but obviously we can't do that because we have to read everything.
Finally.
I'm just filling up. So the hardest part of reviews is sometimes I think it's too trivial to review. So I don't say anything. I read the emails. Anything with TC, I can guarantee you I read it. Right? Is that worth saying anything?
Yes, because I know that you're going to read it, but I don't know when. So how do I know that you already read it if you didn't tell me, right?
Okay, that's a good valid point. And building on so building on that point, sometimes I may be busy. I know I'm a TC maintainer. Kong is a TC maintainer. Jiri is. So it depends on whoever's available. How do we coordinate better with you so that you sometimes you depend on us to review these things, right? How can we do things differently to help you better?
Do you have I don't know. So, for instance, if you know that you will be, you will need more time because you're busy or you need to, you're taking a vacation, you should let us know. if you're a major reviewer.
I'm never on vacation, man. So
Oh,
it's just
see, there's no
I
problem.
may be in a meeting.
It's all hypothetical.
Yeah, it's just I could be just tied up. I maybe have a delivery for 3 days. I won't be available, and of course, I always divide my effort. If I think it's security problem, for example, I'll make time immediately. But sometimes I divert. I say, okay, I'll respond to this, and sometimes the patch gets applied before anybody says act. It may look trivial, but it may have implications that I may be aware of. Right?
Yeah, I mean, send a note if you need more time. Let us know that you're busy or that you need more time for the patch. We are trying to improve patchwork a little bit to give people the ability to like basically click on a patch and say, I will review this, please don't apply this yet. But yeah, I mean, it will take some time to get.
So what, you have a timer which says this dude is not going to review anything. Let me just maybe apply the patch and see.
Yeah.
What's your theory? Well, what is your process on that? If someone doesn't review and it's the patches.
It's patch by patch.
I see. Okay.
Well, there is a recent example.
Mike.
I should have started by saying that I'm just one of the maintainers. There's 4 of us. I don't want to speak for all of them, and they may have different opinions than me.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're going after a general intent, Jamal, because like the recent TC patches from Daniel, where you wanted time and you intended to, but I think the timeout kicked in, and they had to move on. Just as a general example, I think that was like a week where you had said, "Hey, I intend to review these, but."
He thought it was a great example.
So I would suggest maybe a Goodwill Bank. There might be one particular company that's about to go hugely negative, and to withdraw from that bank to not go negative in the stats.
Okay.
On the point of fudging the numbers, patches that are bug fixes in other people's code are good karma, right? They're not necessarily bad karma.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of ideas about how to. I mean, you basically suggest need to improve the accounting in this.
Well, first of all, I think the accounting is fantastic. It immediately has effects on organizations. Like, we're not the number one. Oh, this is horrible. Or also for people individually for their performance reviews and so in corporations. So thank you very much for adding it. So yeah, the question is, some people, not myself, but do a lot of fixes all over the place, and in the current course model, obviously they've kind of penalized for it.
Right. Yes, and I think Andrew was also bringing that up, and like to assign some generality score for people who are only reviewing like patches to their own driver versus people who are reviewing across the tree. So I mean, there's a lot of good ideas there. I try to spend 1 day every release cycle improving the stats, and so maybe one day I'll get to that level of intelligence in the system.
I'm a bit confused with this, what Jamal was commenting. So if Jamal is the maintainer of the TC, should not be always an act before you do something with TC.
I think most of the code we have is in practice unmaintained. So we can't wait for maintainers as a general rule, because then we wouldn't apply nothing, right? I mean, we review the code before we apply it. It's not like it's not reviewed at all when it goes in.
No, I know, but then what's the point of the maintainers being official? I mean, if the maintainer is not the last word before you apply the patch, what's the point?
I mean, if he says no, we will not apply it. But if he doesn't say anything, that we don't know whether it was trivial to him or he was so happy about it, he decided to leave work early. I don't know.
I think it ends up building a habit. If you apply the patches and I didn't act it, then even if I read it, sometimes I'm going to think, okay, it's going to be applied anyway, so I don't do an arc, right? But yeah, and it also builds a habit in someone like me to say, I shouldn't invest as much time anymore. I'll invest when it's necessary. Because if the patches just get applied, I think there's a huge improvement, don't get me wrong, but if they just do get randomly applied, then I don't even arc anything.
I would advise, suggest that if that happens and you feel ignored or some kind of negative feelings, do comment on the list and say this. I wish I could have reviewed this or something along those lines.
And
Otherwise, we don't.
I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Maybe I can send a private email. Right. We need to reduce the hostilities probably. If I say that and then you don't know how someone is feeling that day. They may overreact, and right. Sometimes taking things privately is better. I'm not saying I'm feeling ignored. I'm just saying that.
But I think it's a generally I felt that before too, right? Like it's a common thing. If someone applies your patch and you feel like your opinion doesn't matter, or it's very discouraging to get the patches applied. I mean, exactly. I 100% agree with that.
So you end up putting less time. My time investment goes low because I feel okay. Even if I said something, it still happened. Okay.
We'll close on that feeling of happiness. Thank you, Kuba. Actually, I wanted to also say thank you for making this trip. Thank you for plugging this in. This is actually, I think, something we've been missing for a little while, and it's very important. I think the premise of this conference was to build on top of Linux kernel networking. We've tried to increase the footprint a little bit, but that's still the core tenet, and everything we are talking about here is sort of the anchor point. So thank you.